Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Kerry Parker, and today we have episode 393 for September 9th, 2024. Got a news show for you today. Plenty of stuff to talk about. But real quick, before we get to that, just a couple pre-show notes. First of all, I'm still refining my ideas around the next awareness campaign. I mentioned that last week, and I mentioned it for a couple weeks now, at least. But I'm planning to actually officially launch it in 2 weeks on the next news show, basically. So stay tuned for details on that. I also just reached out to Bruce Schneier. We've been talking for the last few months, but I officially reached out to schedule our interview for the 400th episode podcast. So we'll be scheduling that soon, recording it probably in a few weeks, and make sure we have plenty of time to get that onto the 400th episode, which will be October 28th. I've got a few ideas for what I think we should talk about. He and I will discuss, but I'm open to ideas. If you guys want to throw some out, you can maybe shoot me an email. The best way to do that is send it to feedback@firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com. And of course, patrons, you could just reach out to me on Discord and we can chat about it there. One more quick reminder, because I don't say it often enough. I do still take Dear Carrie questions from you, my listeners. The way you do that is to send me an email at dearcarey@firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com. That's DEARCAREY. And just a reminder, everybody who sends me a question, at least a valid question, I'll put their name in the hat for a free copy of my book, which I draw every month. I don't announce them here on the air, but every month I pick a name out of that hat from somebody who has sent me a good question, and I send them a free PDF of my book. So there's your incentive. I probably will do a listener mailbag episode a little bit later this year, either November or December. But I always reply right away via email. I just save up the Q&A for a whole episode, which I air at a later time. And on top of all that, I got some more exciting podcast interviews coming up. So I'll save that, though, for after the news. So today, we've got some news stories. I told you last week that we'd be talking about the arrest of Telegram's CEO, Pavel Durov. That's an interesting story, but the more interesting part for me, and the part that I want you to learn more about, is Telegram, the app, because all the news stories are calling it a secure messaging app, and it really isn't. So we're gonna talk about that just so you understand. Then we're gonna read an article from Ars Technica about how TVs have become less about selling hardware and much more about monetizing the data of the viewers. We've talked about this before, but this article has a lot of crazy stuff in it that just really honestly makes me angry. Then we're going to talk about an update to the classic sextortion scams. The bad guys have come up with even more devious ways to freak people out and get them to pay money, all of which are fake. So I want to give you an update on that. And then we've got a little bit of good news too. Consumer Reports and a bunch of other public rights groups have filed a request with the Federal Trade Commission here in the U.S. to help all of us with our electronic devices that suddenly become unusable when the company goes out of business or for whatever reason decides to stop supporting them. That is a sentiment which I absolutely share. And I think that it's probably likely the FTC will follow up on that. So that's good news. And then finally, California just approved a new privacy bill. Maybe it's an extension to the CCPA that will make it much easier to opt out of data collection. And I think it's going to cause a real uproar. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, for my tip of the week, with the U.S. election rapidly approaching, and after Labor Day here in the U.S., the campaign election really ramps up. So the next 2 months are going to be crazy, which means there's going to be, well, first of all, a lot of political ads and text messages and stuff that's going to drive everybody crazy, especially people in the swing states, which for those of you outside the U.S., basically there are 50 states, but it really comes down to about 7 of them that matter because all the other states are either very solidly Republican or very solidly Democrat. And the way the Electoral College works, which is an anachronism, but the way we elect our presidents basically means that it's those 7 states where the races are very, very close that when it comes down to it are going to determine the winner. And anyway, along with any such election, comes a lot of mis and disinformation, foreign and domestic, and from both sides. It's a nonpartisan thing, and it comes from all over the place. I mean, the United States government does this in other countries as well. It's just a fact of life. So for the tip of the week, this is something we always need to be thinking about, but with this season approaching, I think it's a good time to review how you can spot quote unquote fake news and what you can do about it. So lots to talk about. Let's get to it. All right, first off, let's talk about this whole Telegram thing. Let me first read this article from the BBC, which kind of gives a good summary of what actually happened. And then we're going to dig into the part that I think is more interesting for this audience, which is whether or not Telegram is actually an encrypted messaging app. So anyway, first off, this is from the BBC. Telegram chief executive Pavel Durov has been arrested by French police at an airport north of Paris. Mr. Durov was detained after his private jet had landed at Le Bourget Airport, French media reported. According to officials, the 39-year-old billionaire was arrested under a warrant for offenses related to the popular messaging app. The investigation is reportedly about a lack of moderation, with Mr. Durov accused of failing to take steps to curb criminal uses of Telegram. The app is accused of failure to cooperate with law enforcement over drug trafficking, child sexual content, and fraud. Telegram has previously denied having insufficient moderation. Pavel Durov was born in Russia and now lives in Dubai, where Telegram is based. He holds dual citizenship for the UAE and France. Telegram is particularly popular in Russia, Ukraine, and former Soviet Union states. The app was banned in Russia in 2018 after a previous refusal by him to hand over user data. The ban was reversed in 2021. Telegram is ranked as one of the major social media platforms after Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, and WeChat. Mr. Durov founded Telegram in 2013. He left Russia in 2014 after refusing to comply with government demands to shut down opposition communities on his VKontakte social media platform, which he sold. Several Russian officials condemned the businessman's arrest, saying it showed the West has double standards when it comes to free speech and democracy. American whistleblower Edward Snowden, who has been living in exile in Russia since 2013, said on X, or Twitter, that Mr. Durov's arrest, quote, was an assault on the basic human rights of speech and association, unquote. In the UK, the app was scrutinized for hosting far-right channels that were instrumental in organizing the violent disorder in English cities earlier this month. Telegram did remove some groups, but overall its system of moderating extremist and illegal content is significantly weaker than that of other social media companies and messenger apps, say cybersecurity experts. Okay, so this is a tough story to really dig into because it's just not clean. The Telegram is kind of a bad place. I think I was joking with some friends lately, and I said it's kind of like if 4chan had a messaging app. And if for those of you who don't know what 4chan is, that's probably a good thing. I don't recommend you go look it up. But this is kind of one of those places where free speech purists run into trouble by getting really close to the line, because free speech is not really completely free. There are things that even the First Amendment in the United States, a bastion of free speech, does not protect. There are things you can't do. You can't threaten other people, for example. You can't incite violence. You can't do these things. You can't commit fraud. You can't do crimes. And Telegram is kind of taking the position, kind of like 4chan and some of these other kind of fringe sites, that, free speech at all costs. You could say anything you want. They're not going to try to moderate you unless forced to. And even then they'll resist it, which is kind of what happened to Telegram. There is a lot of really nasty stuff that goes on Telegram. Telegram really is more of a social media site than it is a messaging app, but it does have direct messaging capabilities and group messaging capabilities. And so what drives me crazy is that in all the discussion of Telegram, the shortened headlines or whatever always list Telegram as a secure messaging app. And the CEO, Pavel Durov, constantly talks about how secure Telegram is, even going so far as to say that like Signal and WhatsApp and some of these other, what I would maybe call true end-to-end encrypted secure messaging apps, are honeypots for intelligence agencies, or backdoored or whatever, and theirs is so much better when it is just not. And so that is what I want to focus on here. Because the other stuff is it's way too hard. It would take hours. We could do whole programs on that, and it's really not related to privacy and security. So the second article here This is from Matthew Green, who is a Johns Hopkins cybersecurity researcher and cryptographer, a very, very famous person, somebody I would absolutely love to have on the show, by the way. I think I've reached out to him before and just didn't hear back. But anyway, he wrote this article, and it's pretty long, but I've tried to pull out just the important parts here. If you want to get the more technical aspects of this, I would recommend you read the full article, but let me read what he says about Telegram being a secure messaging app. So his article is titled, "Is Telegram Really an Encrypted Messaging App?" This blog is reserved for more serious things, and ordinarily I would spend time on questions like the above. But much as I'd like to spend my time writing about exciting topics, sometimes the world requires a bit of what Brad DeLong calls intellectual garbage pickup, namely, correcting wrong or mostly wrong ideas that spread unchecked across the internet, which, by the way, is a great tie-in with our tip of the week this week. This post is inspired by the recent and concerning news that Telegram's CEO Pavel Durov has been arrested by French authorities for its failure to sufficiently moderate content. While I don't know the details, the use of criminal charges to coerce social media companies is a pretty worrying escalation, and I hope there's more to the story, and I would agree with that. But this arrest is not what I want to talk about today. What I do want to talk about is one specific detail of the reporting, specifically the fact that nearly every news report about the arrest refers to Telegram as an encrypted messaging app. This phrasing drives me nuts because in a very limited technical sense, it's not wrong. Yet in every sense that matters, it fundamentally misrepresents what Telegram is and how it works in practice. And this misrepresentation is bad for both journalists and particularly for Telegram's users, many of whom could be badly hurt as a result. Many systems use encryption in some way or another. However, when we talk about encryption in the context of modern private messaging services, the word typically has a very specific meaning. It refers to the use of default end-to-end encryption to protect users' message content. When used in an industry-standard way, this feature ensures that every message will be encrypted using encryption keys that are only known to the communicating parties and not to the service provider. From your perspective as a user, an encrypted messenger ensures that each time you start a conversation, your message will only be readable by the folks you intend to speak with. If the operator of a messaging service tries to view the content of your messages, all they'll see is useless encrypted junk. That same guarantee holds for anyone who might hack into the provider's servers and also, for better or for worse, to law enforcement agencies that serve providers with a subpoena. Telegram clearly fails to meet this stronger definition for a simple reason. It does not end-to-end encrypt conversations by default. If you want to use end-to-end encryption in Telegram, you must manually activate an optional end-to-end encryption feature called Secret Chats for every single private conversation you want to have. The feature is explicitly not turned on for the vast majority of conversations and is only available for one-to-one conversations and never for group chats with more than 2 people in them. As a kind of weird bonus, activating end-to-end encryption in Telegram is oddly difficult for non-expert users to actually do. For one thing, the button that activates Telegram's encryption feature is not visible from the main conversation pane or from the home screen. To find it in the iOS app, I had to click at least 4 times. Once to access the user's profile, once to make a hidden menu pop up showing me the options, and a final time to confirm that I wanted to use encryption. And even after this, I was not able to actually have an encrypted conversation, since Secret Chats only works if your conversation partner happens to be online when you do this. In other words, when you make this setting change. Overall, this is quite different from the experience of starting a new encrypted chat in an industry-standard modern messaging application, which simply requires you to open a new chat window. While it might seem like I'm being picky, the difference in adoption between default end-to-end encryption and this experience is likely very significant. The practical impact is that the vast majority of one-on-one Telegram conversations and literally every single group chat are probably visible on Telegram servers, which can see and record the content of all messages sent between users. That may or may not be a problem for every Telegram user, but it's certainly not something we did advertise as particularly well encrypted. And then he actually talks a little bit about some of the details of the encryption standards, which honestly is just mostly gobbledygook, mostly because it is. In fact, their homegrown techniques for encryption include a technique called garbling. And I think it's even called infinite garbling. One of the key rules to doing crypto, and by that I mean cryptography, of course, is you never roll your own. You always use the industry standard stuff, the things that have been vetted and beat on and have stood the test of time. You never do your own. But at least if you do, you're 100% transparent about it so somebody else can pick it up and test it to see if it actually does what you say it does. Neither of which Telegram does. So, all right. So I'm skipping some of those technical details. If you really want them, read the whole article. But let me get back to the last part here. Telegram's encryption has been subject to heavy criticism since at least 2016, and possibly earlier, for many of the reasons I outlined in this post. In fact, many of these criticisms were made by experts, including myself, in years-old conversations with Pavel Durov on Twitter. Although the interaction with Durov could sometimes be harsh, I still mostly assumed good faith from Telegram back in those days. And 2016, this is like 8 years ago. I believe that Telegram was busy growing their network and that in time, they would improve the quality and usability of the platform's end-to-end encryption. For example, by activating it as a default, providing support for group chats, and making it possible to start encrypted chats with offline users. What's actually happened is a lot more confusing to me. Instead of improving the usability of Telegram's end-to-end encryption, the owners of Telegram have more or less kept their encryption UX, which is user experience, unchanged since 2016. At the same time, Telegram CEO Pavel Durov has continued to aggressively market Telegram as a secure messenger. Most recently, he issued a scathing criticism of Signal and WhatsApp on his personal Telegram channel, implying that those systems were backdoored by U.S. government and only Telegram's independent encryption protocols were really trustworthy. While this might be a reasonable nerd argument if it was taking place between two platforms that both supported default end-to-end encryption, Telegram really has no legs to stand on in this particular discussion. Indeed, it no longer feels amusing to see the Telegram organization urge people away from default encrypted messengers while refusing to implement essential features that would widely encrypt their users' messages. In fact, it's starting to feel a bit malicious. Okay, the article goes on, but I think that's the right note to end on. This guy, Pavel Durov, really has been very vocal and very full of unjustified hubris about the quality of his own product. And it really does come down to these simple things. If encryption is not on by default, you may as well not have it. It's what Steve Gibson likes to call the tyranny of the default. A lot of people aren't aware that it's an option, and they just hear on the news, oh, Telegram is a secure messaging service. Oh, and by the way, the government or the police are really upset with them for not being able to provide information. Well, people get the idea that, oh, well, that's probably because it's encrypted and they can't. That is not true. The reason they don't give over information is because they fight every single request for information on free speech grounds, and just because apparently they don't like to do it. But they have the information. They actually could give it if they wanted to, or if somebody hacked into their systems and got it, because by default, they are not encrypted end to end. Now, again, I know this is a fine detail, but point to point, each of the connections where this data is traveling probably is encrypted. But at each node along the way, as this data is being transferred around from person A to person B, from Alice to Bob, anybody along the way, in particular Telegram and on their servers, can read or decrypt these messages locally. And unless you've gone to these crazy steps to set up an encrypted chat with that person. One thing I have not figured out is if you have to do this every single time you do a chat with, let's say, Alice and Bob, or is it sufficient for Alice and Bob to set this up once while both Alice and Bob are online, apparently, and then all future messages will be that way? It almost doesn't sound that way, but regardless, it's too hard to do, and most people probably don't know they need to do it, and they don't make it obvious. So yes, this is a real problem with Telegram, and more broadly speaking, all these safety standards are great, but if they're not on by default, you may as well not have them. Let's say that you are somebody who uses taxis all the time, and you want to use the one that's the most safe. And so taxi company A says, we have the safest cars on the road. Great. You get in the car. But in order for the airbags, the ABS, and the collision avoidance systems in the car to work, the driver, once you enter the vehicle, has to do 4 different things to enable all of them for that car ride. And if he forgets to do them, your car is actually not safe. Would you consider that to be a safe car? I wouldn't. And as soon as he picks up another passenger, if there are 2 passengers in the back, all those safety features become disabled automatically. To me, that is not secure. So anyway, that's the point. That's the point I wanted to make. The political aspects to this and the free speech aspects to this, I'm not going to get much more into. But if you're interested, it's all over the news, and I'm sure you'll have no shortage of sources if you want to dig into that some more. All right, next up, we got an article from Ars Technica about how TVs are becoming even more invasive for our privacy, which, forgive my French, is really, really pissing me off. So let me start with this one from Ars Technica. It's a little bit long, but man, there's a lot of stuff in here, some of which I knew, some of which I maybe suspected, and then other new stuff, which is just really bothersome. All right, and the title of the article is, Your TV Has Become a Digital Billboard, and It's Only Getting Worse. Success in the TV industry used to mean selling as many TV sets as possible. But with smart TVs becoming mainstream and hardware margins falling, OEMs have sought new ways to make money, and OEMs is original equipment manufacturers. TV operating system providers can access a more frequent revenue source at higher margins, which has led to a viewing experience loaded with ads. Some TV brands already prioritize data collection and the ability to sell ads, and most are trying to boost their appeal to advertisers. Smart TV OSs, operating systems, have become the cash cow of the TV business, with providers generating revenue by licensing the software and through revenue sharing of in-app purchases and subscriptions. A huge part of tvOS revenue comes from selling ads, including on the OS's home screen and screensaver, and through free ad-supported streaming television channels, which, by the way, I don't know if this article says the acronym, but FAST, which stands for Free Ad-Supported Television, is a really big industry term right now. You may not see it marketed that way, but a lot of what we're going to talk about here is due to these new FAST television systems like Fubo and Roku to some extent. So anyway, back to the article. Group M, the world's largest media investment company, reported that smart TV ad revenue grew 20% from 2023 to 2024 and will grow another 20% to reach $46 billion next year. In September 2023, Patrick Horner, practice leader of consumer electronics at analyst Omdia, reported that, quote, each new connected TV platform user generates around $5 per quarter in data and advertising revenue, unquote. Automatic content recognition, or ACR, which is something that I've talked to you guys about on this show before. ACR tech is at the heart of the smart TV ads business. Most TV brands say users can opt out of ACR, but we've already seen Vizio take advantage of the feature without user permission. ACR is also sometimes turned on by default, I bet more than sometimes, and the off switch is often buried in a settings menu. Including ACR on a TV at all says a lot about a TV maker's priorities. Most users have almost nothing to gain from ACR and face privacy concerns by sharing information, sometimes in real time, about what they do with their TVs. And by the way, ACR, and I think the article will talk about this a little bit later, but automatic content recognition basically is your TV watching what you watch. Doesn't matter what the input source is, doesn't matter where it's coming from. It could be a DVD player, if you still have such a thing. It could be from your game system. It could be from your cable TV. It could be from your internet streaming box. It's kind of like Shazam for TV. If you're familiar with the Shazam app that identifies music by listening to it. By looking at the images on your screen, by examining the pixels that are on your screen, it can kind of fingerprint content and figure out what you're watching. Movies, TV shows, even ads. And that's what ACR is all about. At this point, consumers have come to expect ads and tracking on budget TVs from names like Vizio or Roku. But the biggest TV companies in TV are working on turning their sets into data-prolific billboards too. In recent years, we've seen companies like LG and Samsung increase their TV's ad capabilities as advertisers become more eager to access tracking data from TVs. LG, for example, started sharing data gathered from its TVs with Nielsen, which is, if you remember Nielsen ratings back in the day, that's the company that tries to keep track of how popular any given show is by how many people are watching it. That's the Nielsen they're referring to. Giving the data and market measurement firm, Nielsen, quote, the largest ACR data footprint in the industry, unquote, according to an October announcement. The deal gives Nielsen streaming and linear TV data. The deal gives Nielsen streaming and linear TV data. And by the way, linear TV, I think what they mean by that is either over-the-air TV or cable. Basically, all the TV that's not streaming. From LG TVs, and provides firms buying ads on LG TVs with always-on streaming measurement and big data from LG Ad Solutions via Nielsen's One Ads dashboard. LG, which recently unveiled a goal of evolving its hardware business into an ad-pushing media and entertainment platform company, expects there to be 300 million WebOS TVs in homes by 2026. That represents a huge data collection and recurring revenue opportunity. In September, LG said it would invest 1 trillion KRW, which is about $737 million, through 2028 into its WebOS business, or the business behind its smart TV OS. The company said updates will include improving WebOS's UI, AI-based recommendations, and search capabilities. Similarly, Samsung recently updated its ACR tech to track exposure to ads viewed on its TVs via streaming services instead of just from linear TV. Samsung is also trying to make its ACR data more valuable for ad targeting, including through a deal signed in December with analytics firm Experian, which you may recognize as also a credit bureau. Budget TVs are the leaders in this trend, often offsetting cheap hardware prices with ads and data collection. Some people seek out the latest display developments, but many consumers merely want the cheapest TV they can buy within a certain size range. Various brands lure budget shoppers with low prices, but then force them to pay through heightened ad exposure, either immediately or after a future software update. So let me just stop there. That phrase just got to me, right? So you buy the TV. Out of the box, it comes with some default factory software where it starts out being kind of benign and normal, what you would expect. And then once you connect it to the internet and it starts updating its software automatically, now I'm starting to see more ads. That just drives me crazy. And that's not the only thing in this article that's going to get me mad, but let me keep going. In recent months, we've seen budget brands test users' limits when it comes to ads, and this is all happening amid a global shift to streaming services that are also increasingly ad-driven. Roku OS is constantly trying to fit more ads with stronger targeting into its UI, whether that's on the menu, on screensavers, or delivered via Roku TV channels. Earlier this year, Roku OS introduced home screen video ads. So in other words, when you first power on the television, before you've selected your channel or whatever or whatever input you're going to do, there are ads running on your television, video ads. Oh God, that would just drive me nuts. With software updates easily forcing new ad capabilities into already owned TVs, it's likely that this strategy will intensify in the near term as OS providers try to find more ways to support new types of ads. In the long term, with price often cited as a top factor in TV purchasing decisions, pricier brands may potentially cave and adopt more ad-centric tactics. Such moves could help those brands offer prices that are more competitive with budget options. Even before smart TVs, watching TV typically meant watching plenty of commercials and product placements. But internet connectivity, advanced tracking techniques, and interest in TV data collection from megastores are pushing TVs to evolve from digital billboards to digital stores. People usually only buy a new TV every few years or longer, which has driven OEMs to the ongoing revenue potential tied to data and ads. For users, this means that TV watching could become much more commercialized. Oh God, it can get worse, as the industry seeks new ways to use TVs for ad tracking. The current focus is on developing shoppable ads, or ads that let people make purchases while using their TV. Streaming services like Hulu already show shoppable ads, and TV OS operators are exploring ways to capitalize on the trend. Amazon and Roku TVs, for example, have shoppable ads on screensavers. Other brands like Samsung are building out their ability to deliver shoppable ads on TVs. Relevant players are exploring formats like QR codes, games, and ads you can navigate with your remote. And TV brands are increasingly working with big stores like Walgreens and Best Buy to more extensively target advertising. Omdia's Horner tells me that shoppable ads are the next wave of smart TV advertising. Amazon and Walmart are expected to lead the way as huge retailers that can incorporate the purchase histories they have from their stores with viewer data. Stakeholders argue that shoppable ads provide a service to viewers, but the obvious winner is advertisers. As Tony Marlowe, CMO of LG Ad Solutions, wrote earlier this year, without shoppable TV ads, quote, marketers have been unable to gain a truly holistic view of the entire purchase journey, unquote. Going even further, newcomer Displace is offering a peek at an aggressive TV as a store future. The company says its sets, which will ship at the end of the year, will be able to use proprietary gesture tech to tell if someone is raising a hand. The TV will pause the content and use computer vision to look for stuff the viewer can buy. Viewers can place items they want in a shopping cart and pay for them using the TV's integrated NFC reader. Let me stop and explain what you just heard. What they're saying is that the TV will have some sort of a sensor built in, maybe a camera, maybe it's LiDAR, maybe it's something else, something that would allow the TV to constantly view who's in front of it and look for somebody who's raising a hand. So here you are watching a show, and in the background is a car you think, oh, that's cool. Or someone's wearing an outfit that you like, oh, I'd like to buy that. Or there's some product placed, probably not by accident, somewhere in the scene. Someone's eating a bag of chips, or someone is drinking a new liquor or whatever, and you want to buy that. So you raise your hand, the TV pauses the action. Some AI algorithm, and eventually it probably won't need that. It'll probably be some API that the TV could figure out what current products are in view, and it will basically highlight all the things in the thing you could buy, and then you could use a remote to find out what those things are, get details on them, put them in your shopping cart, and buy them. Is that convenient? Sure, but what is that thing doing to scan the room to figure out who's there and how many hands are being raised? But it gets worse. Let me keep reading. Another niche upcoming TV set is the Telly. That's Tellly. The company's TVs are free, but allow the startup to track their owners, and they have a secondary screen for showing ads, including when the TV is off. The secondary screen can also display information like weather and sports scores. So you can't see the picture, but basically it's the regular TV, and then mounted on the wall, and just below that is another screen that's very thin. It's like, I don't know, let's say it's 50 inches long, but only 10 inches high or 8 inches high. And that's another screen. And on that screen, might be the current weather and the time and sports scores you're monitoring, but it's also going to have ads. Telly's prospective owners must answer a long series of questions, like if they're registered to vote and who their cell phone provider is, with that data used for ad targeting. Telly has discussed further potential ways to commercialize TV watching, such as letting people earn gift cards by filling out surveys, also to help targeted advertising on the TV. Telly takes tracking to a new level, especially since owners can't opt out. Blocking tracking may result in an owner being charged for the TV. The company's viewing and activity data policy says its TV can track a myriad of things, including settings, search queries, apps usage, and how many people are within 25 feet of the TV. Telly claims that advertisers won't see personal information when viewing data accumulated from its TVs. Sure. As the TV industry has grown its ad capabilities over the years, shoppers have nearly lost the option to buy a TV that doesn't connect to the internet. Jacob Hoffman-Andrews, senior staff technologist at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, described the trend of building surveillance into all new smart TVs as, quote, incredibly invasive and little understood, unquote. In an email to ours, he added, quote, nobody wants a snooping and snitching television, but lately that's all you can buy, unquote. Those who want a TV without an internet connection have few options. You can try to prevent a smart TV from tracking you, but again, turning off ACR and other tracking techniques can be challenging. Some TVs remove basic features like internet connectivity if you don't let them track you. So again, let me stop. What they're saying is if you don't, some of these TVs, if you don't allow them to track you, take away internet connectivity, which you might think, okay, that's a win-win, right? Well, what if, like a lot of people, I'm guessing, you bought the TV to use the built-in apps to access things like Netflix and Amazon Prime TV and all these other things? Because a lot of those smart TVs have those apps built in, right? So you don't need to buy yet another box to get access to that. It comes with your TV. Ooh, that's convenient. But if without internet connectivity, none of those things will work. All right, we're almost done. Let me finish. Companies like Telly open a window for other brands to consider more intrusive tracking and ads. Consider a world in which you have to say a brand name at your TV to skip ads, as demonstrated by a Sony patent. So I didn't include this in the article, but there's a picture, and it talks a little bit about it. But basically what this thing says is, let's say you're watching a McDonald's ad, and you don't want to watch the ad. In order to skip the ad, you have to say McDonald's, and it hears you say McDonald's, which forces you to imprint their brand name in your brain, and then you can skip the ad. That's an actual patent filed by Sony. All right, back to the article. Some things TVs already track would have sounded extreme before 2011 when ACR started taking off. For example, using ACRs, TV can reveal to OS providers, and therefore to advertisers, the shows watched on the set and whether that content was streamed or watched via an antenna or cable. ACR can even identify DVDs watched on a TV. Per Ad Exchanger, quote, ACR ingests pixels on screen to assign a value to each frame, unquote, which is like an unknown fingerprint. The OS sends these fingerprints, quote, to a database that logs content available on TV to find a known match and identify the content. Once ACR identifies the show, it can tie that viewing data to a specific household, such as a given household watching The Big Bang Theory at 9 p.m., unquote. Advertisers can combine this information with other tactics, like advertisement identification, which assigns a unique ID to ads to further track TV usage. But there are plenty who don't know the extent to which their TVs are monitoring them. Complexity in understanding and controlling TV tracking is especially relevant as more sets incorporate microphones and cameras. Terms of service are often complex, wordy agreements buried in elusive TV settings or online, and companies have ways of strong-arming TV owners into accepting such agreements. Further complicating matters, it's possible for consumers to disable tracking from the TV OS providers such as Google, but still be tracked by the TV OEM like TCL. Again, let me briefly stop. What that's saying is your TV is probably tracking you multiple ways. There are probably multiple things on your TV that are tracking you. Probably all the apps are tracking you. If you're using a Google TV service, that's tracking you. And the TV maker itself is also likely tracking you. So you have to find, if you can, and if you're even able to, and disable all that tracking. With TV sales declining and many shoppers prioritizing pricing, smart TV players will continue developing ads that are harder to avoid and better at targeting. Interestingly, Horner told ours that smart TV advertising revenue exceeding smart TV hardware revenue, as well as ad sale margins surpassing those of hardware, is a US-only trend, albeit one that shows no signs of abating. And again, I'll stop there to probably say the reason for that is if you're in the EU, you probably have privacy laws that prevent all this crap. All right, back to the article, almost done. OLED has become a mainstay in the TV marketplace, and until the next big display technology becomes readily available, OEMs are scrambling to make money in a saturated TV market filled with budget options. Selling ads is an obvious way to bridge the gap between today and the next big thing in TVs. Indeed, with companies like Samsung and LG making big deals with analytics firms and other brands building their businesses around ads, the industry's obsession with ads will only intensify. And as we've seen before with TV commercials, which have gotten more frequent over time, once the ad genie is out of the bottle, it tends to grow, not go back inside. One side effect we're already seeing, Horner notes, is, quote, a proliferation of more TV operating systems, unquote. While choice is often a good thing for consumers, it's important to consider if new options from companies like Amazon, Comcast, and TiVo actually do anything to notably improve the smart TV experience for owners. For most people that want fewer ads on their TVs, the only option is to vote with your dollar. There's also a growing pool of technically savvy folks sharing hacks for disconnecting smart TVs from their web or even do-it-yourselfing your own smart TV. And that last line there is a link, which goes to a website that talks about people who are finding ways to replace the operating system that comes with your TV with like a Linux-based open source thing, like we've done with home routers, for example, which is a very welcome development. And if this keeps going like it's going, I think we're going to see a lot more people trying to do that. And then, of course, the TV manufacturers are going to try to prevent that from happening. And in the U.S., we have this thing called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA, that will probably prevent anybody from circumventing that. It is just so ridiculous. So this really upsets me. It makes me so angry that it's gotten this bad. And I don't think most people have any clue this is going on. Certainly the TVs aren't making it obvious. And if you drill down into the settings to try to find these tracking settings that you can sometimes disable, I've looked at this on my television, by the way, and it's very hard to find, and the wording is horrible. There's no obvious stop tracking me button. It's all these euphemisms like enhanced experience or things like that make it sound like it's a good thing for you. Now, I've said this multiple times before on this show, and I'll say it again. I don't connect any of my TVs to the internet. When they first come up and they want, enter your Wi-Fi or whatever, I just don't do it. I skip, come back later, skip for now. I really wonder how much longer it's going to be before you can't do that. I wonder at some point these manufacturers are going to not let you use your television, not let you skip the network setup stage before they will even allow your TV to work. I am sure that there are some TVs that are already doing that, particularly these really low budget options. Obviously, this Telly one that I talked about is doing that. But I'll bet some of these Roku and TCL TVs that are counting on making money on the ads and collecting your data, because you can't see this in the article either, but they showed this timeline graph of ad revenue versus hardware revenue, how much money these TV manufacturers make per device on selling you something with a markup or making money on the back end by collecting your data and showing you ads. And basically, they're giving away TVs now at this point. They're giving away at cost. That's why they're so amazingly cheap, because they know they're going to make up money on the back end in perpetuity by collecting all this data and showing you ads. And because they can do software updates whenever they want, once you've connected them to the internet, they could just keep making it worse. They can keep showing you more ads and finding more ways to send you ads. And again, that's just the TV part. That's not even including the apps that you're using and the services you're using that are also doing the same thing wherever they can. We just have to get privacy laws in this country. And we've got one story today that may play into this toward the end. So hang tight. We'll talk about that when we get there. All right, just a couple more short stories, and then we'll get to the tip of the week. This next one's pretty sad, but it's also important. So be sure you pay attention to this. Sextortion scams are on the rise. They're getting more and more clever, which means they're getting more and more effective, which means they're hurting more people. And this is a couple new developments I want to tell you about, and I'm reading here from Krebs on security. An old but persistent email scam known as sextortion has a new personalized touch. The missives, or emails, which claim that malware has captured webcam footage of recipients pleasuring themselves, now include a photo of the target's home in a bid to make threats about publishing the videos more frightening and convincing. This week, several readers reported receiving sextortion emails that addressed them by name and included images of their street or front yard that were apparently lifted from an online mapping application, such as Google Maps. The message purports to have been sent from a hacker who's compromised your computer and used your webcam to record a video of you while you were watching porn. The missive threatens to release the video to all of your contacts unless you pay a Bitcoin ransom. In this case, the demand is just shy of $2,000, payable by scanning a QR code embedded in the email. Following a salutation that includes the recipient's full name, the start of the message reads, quote, "Is visiting," and it gives your street address, "a more convenient way to contact you if you don't take action? Nice location, by the way," unquote. And then it shows a photo of what this person was sent, which is presumably a picture of the front of their house. The message tells people they have 24 hours to pay up, or else their embarrassing videos will be released to all of their contacts, friends, and family members. And the message goes on to say, quote, "Don't even think about replying to this. It's pointless. I don't make mistakes, comma," and then it gives your name again. Again, to try to make it more personal. "If I notice that you've shared or discussed this email with someone else, your video will instantly start getting sent to your contacts," unquote, which again implies that they have hacked your system and can tell if you share this email with somebody. The remaining sections of the two-page sextortion message, which arrives as a PDF attachment, are fairly formulaic and include thematic elements seen in most previous sextortion waves. Those include claims that the extortionist has installed malware on your computer. In this case, the scammer claims the spyware is called Pegasus, and that they are watching everything you do on your machine. And by the way, Pegasus is the name brand product from NSO Group. So if you happen to know anything about NSO Group or Pegasus, or more likely, if you go to Google and say, what is Pegasus? You're going to see a lot of very troubling stories about how powerful this malware is and how hard it is to stop. And you're going to think, oh my God, if I got infected by Pegasus, I'm screwed. All right, back to the article. Previous innovations in sextortion customization involved sending emails that included at least one password they had previously used at an account online that was tied to their email address. Sextortion, even semi-automated scams like this one with no actual physical leverage to backstop the extortion demand, is a serious crime that could lead to devastating consequences for victims. Sextortion occurs when someone threatens to distribute your private and sensitive material if you don't provide them with images of a sexual nature, sexual favors, or money. According to the FBI, here are some things you can do to avoid being a victim. 1. Never send compromising images of yourself to anyone, no matter who they are or who they say they are. 2. Don't open attachments from people you don't know, and be wary of opening attachments even from those who you do know. And I think the reason they're being because it's pretty easy to spoof the sender of an email. Or one of your friends and family may have gotten hacked and they're sending it from their account. And then 3, turn off and cover any web cameras when you are not using them. The FBI says in many sextortion cases, the perpetrator is an adult pretending to be a teenager, and you are just one of many victims being targeted by the same person. If you believe you're a victim of sextortion or know someone else who is, the FBI wants to hear from you. Contact your local FBI office or toll free at 1-800-CALL-FBI. So let me just point out that a lot of these types of automated scams, be they sextortion or otherwise, are enabled by open source intelligence, or OSINT. This is what I've been talking to you about for the last several news shows in the tips of the week in my series of articles about how to remove your data from the internet, or at least try to. And the availability of this data is often used in these automated scams to pull in things like your full name, your address, things that are going to be very personal to you and make it seem like they know everything about you. And therefore, they must have somehow hacked into your computer and what they're saying is true. Even if you don't pleasure yourself in front of your computer, you know, if they're making that up or if they've generated AI videos based on other video of you, you know, it's still not something you're going to want to have sent to your friends and family and posted all over your social media accounts. In other versions of this, they'll actually pretend to be somebody who's, you know, wants to date you or online or whatever. And hey, here's a racy picture of me. Why don't you send me one back? And of course, what they send you is not them. And they're trying to get you to send them compromising images of yourself. And then they'll turn around and blackmail you. I just saw another article recently about another new tactic with sextortion scams, and that is to pretend to know information about your spouse. So again, probably using open source intelligence, they figure out you and your spouse's name. They email you and say, hey, I caught your spouse cheating because I hacked their computer. I've got video proof of this. And unless you want me to send that to all the people in his contact list, which probably includes your friends and family, you need to pay me some money. And the one example I saw that, you know, they tried to sound more helpful, like they were trying to be a good person and they just want some money for their time and trouble. But again, all of this is basically enabled by open source intelligence and places that have collected your data that have been hacked. Data breaches, in other words, where they can take these bits of information and send them to you in this automated email using your full name, using your local address, looking your house up on Google Maps and showing you a photo and saying, yeah, I just pulled up in front of your house and took a picture. Nice place. Trying to personalize these things in such a way to make it look real. So just be aware that this happens. And when you get an email like this, just delete it. Or if you feel so inclined, alert your local law enforcement or the FBI. Okay, now for a little bit of good news here. First of all, this is from Consumer Reports, and while nothing has happened with this yet, this is a good first step, and knowing the FTC like we do and our favorite chair, Lena Khan, I think there's a good chance that they will actually take action on this, which would be wonderful. Consumer Reports and the US PIRG, which stands for Public Interest Research Group, which I think we talked about recently, along with 15 other groups, submitted a letter today to the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, urging the commission to develop clear guidance to address, quote-unquote, software tethering. Software tethering is where manufacturers use software to control and limit how devices function after a consumer has purchased it. One of the ways that companies may harm consumers with software tethering is by locking features behind a subscription wall after the purchase of a device. For example, Happiest Baby limited consumers' ability to resell their product. In July, customers who had spent about $1,700 on a SNOO connected bassinet manufactured by Happiest Baby discovered that some of the features that were originally advertised with the product would become part of a new $20 per month subscription starting in July 15th. Customers who had already purchased the bassinet for those features don't have to pay the monthly fee, but if they want to resell their snoo or give it to others, the new buyers will not have access to those features. Other times, companies brick a connected device by using software to render it non-functional after purchase. This often leaves consumers with devices that no longer function, even if the consumer still wants to use the product, and it contributes to the massive amount of electronics piling up in our nation's landfills. In May, Spotify told people who had bought its $90 Car Thing device that support for the product would end in December 2024, only 22 months after Spotify first sold the product. Initially, Spotify didn't offer any sort of refund for device owners, but later did provide customers who complained refunds on their Spotify subscriptions. The FTC has a number of tools at its disposal to help establish standards for company support of internet-connected devices. The groups are calling on the agency to set norms around the following 5 items. First, require disclosure of a guaranteed minimum support time on product packaging. Companies should plan for and disclose to the consumer their plans for both security updates, but also anticipated engineering and cloud resources to keep a product functional to a certain date. 2, require companies to ensure that the core functionality of a product will work even if the internet connection fails or the software stops getting updated. An e-bike should start without a connection to the server or control from an app. An oven should maintain its ability to heat food, and a thermostat should still retain the ability to control an HVAC system. 3, encourage tools and methods that enable reuse if software support ends. Customers could create and distribute tools and software to repurpose products so that products provide continued use. Tools could include upgrades to hardware so manufacturers can continue software support, or software that would allow consumers to repurpose the hardware for offline use and should be continually available for the reasonably likely lifespan of the hardware. 4, protect adversarial interoperability. And first time I heard that term was from Cory Doctorow, and that's probably where this came from. One way products can be repurposed is when a competitor or third party creates a reuse or modification tool, something that adds to or converts the old device. Adversarial interoperability could revitalize the reuse market and ensure that far less hardware gets trashed when it loses software support. And finally, 5, conduct an educational program to encourage manufacturers to build longevity into the design of their products. Much like the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency has pushed its Secure by Design program to encourage companies to build security into their products from the beginning, we encourage the FTC to create a clear list of design principles that would promote the longevity of the connected products manufacturers sell. So yeah, that is absolutely fantastic. That would be a great thing for the FTC to tackle and start, pushing requirements on manufacturers so that all these electronic devices we're buying will stay useful even after the company goes out of business or decides they don't want to make the product anymore or doesn't want to make software updates for the device anymore. Another solution that's often discussed around things like this, that I'm kind of surprised didn't come up in here, maybe it's implied, is to require that companies escrow their software and hardware designs so that if they do go out of business for whatever reason, that those materials, the design of the hardware and the software become publicly available, at least to anybody who's already purchased that product, which would theoretically allow them or third parties to repurpose that hardware by making new software. But a lot of these things are just no-brainers. I mean, like, if you buy an internet-connected device, okay, there might be some internet-only features that don't work if it doesn't have an internet connection or if the company goes out of business or their servers are down or whatever. But the basic functionality of that device should always work, even if it can't connect to the internet. And if I'm buying a product, I absolutely think it makes sense that companies should have some sort of a commitment on the label, like with a date, saying, that this product will be supported by security updates and by software updates, until these dates, which could be different dates, but they should be listed there. I should know that when I buy it, and the company should be committed and be forced to commit to providing that support until those dates are up. Now, the adversarial interoperability thing is going to be tough because a lot of companies explicitly try to prevent this from happening. This is where you get, printer cartridges that only work in their printer and not allowing third-party cartridges that would be just fine and probably a whole lot cheaper, but are prevented from being used. through the means of software and being protected by things like the DMCA. Anyway, there's a lot to this. We could probably do an entire episode on this, and maybe someday I will. But for now, I just want to let you know that good things are happening with regard to that. I will be very interested to see if the FTC picks this up and what they do with it. And if I hear about that, of course, I will keep you posted. All right, last story, and it's short before we get to my tip of the week. And this is from Dark Reading, and this is great news. California state legislature passed a bill that will require internet browsers and mobile operating systems to let users opt out of the sale or sharing of their personal information. This bill now heads to California Governor Gavin Newsom for his signature. The California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, already gave state residents the right to send legally binding opt-out requests to companies, but the new bill will require that browser and mobile operating systems provide a mechanism to send these opt-out preference signals. Users would be able to opt out of sharing information by selecting this signal on their internet browser and operating system, and the browser would automatically send out opt-out requests to every site and app the user visits by default. At the moment, browsers such as Google Chrome, Apple Safari, and Microsoft's Edge, along with Android and iOS mobile platforms, currently lack these tools, meaning that users need to download third-party software in order to send opt-out preference signals. The language of the bill, which was approved by both the state Senate and Assembly last week, says the method of activating the opt-out process needs to be, quote, easy for a reasonable person to locate and configure, unquote. The bill's advancement was heralded by the California Privacy Protection Agency. At its December 8, 2023 board meeting, the agency noted that browsers that natively support opt-out preference signals, including Mozilla's Firefox, DuckDuckGo, and Brave, currently make up less than 10% of the global desktop browser market. While this is a state law applying only to California residents, the required changes in browsers and operating systems mean this opt-out mechanism will be available for all users. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that just because you have access to this, that companies need to respect it. If they ask or can figure out that you are not a California resident, they could just say no. And my guess is many will actually try to do that. But as is often the case, when California makes privacy laws like this, even non-California residents do end up benefiting. So basically what this sounds like to me, and even though the article doesn't explicitly say it, and I admit I didn't go and read the full text of the bill, but we've tried this in the past, and there was a flag called Do Not Track. This was a setting you could turn on in your browser that would automatically tell sites that you go to, hey, I don't want to be tracked. Everybody ignored that because there was no law behind it, and there was a lot of kerfuffle over how that was implemented. For example, I think Microsoft had it on by default. So a lot of companies said, well, the user didn't choose that. Microsoft chose that. Therefore, I can just ignore it. And so basically Do Not Track went nowhere. And then later there was this kind of Do Not Track 2.0 thing called Global Privacy Control, or GPC. And I actually have an article about this. I'll put a link to it in the show notes that tells you how to turn this on and how to verify that you did that correctly. To the point of this article, they want to make sure that this new thing, whatever it is, whether it's D&T, Global Privacy Control, or something new, and I'm just hoping that they'll just go with Global Privacy Control for this, is that it should be very obvious and very easy for everyone to turn on. I'm thinking for most web browsers, it's going to be an obvious button on the front page, or very easy to find within settings. And some browsers will certainly have it on by default, like I'm sure Brave and DuckDuckGo browsers will, and probably Firefox too. And then what that means is every website you go to, every app that you use, instead of having some nasty terms of service thing that you'll never read, or some really obscure setting with some euphemistic phrase about why you should never turn this on that would prevent them from collecting data on you, this flips everything on its head and says, okay, by default, if you see this, regardless of what your terms of service say, regardless of what your cookie policy says and your cookie pop-up does and all these other things that you try to make people do, all these hoops you force them to jump through and these misdirections you give them, all that goes away. This all says that if the customer turns on this setting, you need to interpret that as don't collect any of my data, don't sell any of my data, respect my privacy. That is huge. So I will be very interested to see what ripple effects this has. And calling all the way back to that TV thing, I would think this would apply to them too. So TV manufacturers, for California residents, I would think would have to offer this as well, and it should apply to everything on that television. All the apps, all the streaming services, and the television itself. But, we shall see. I will keep you posted. All right, now it is time for my tip of the week. And as I alluded to earlier in the show, the United States presidential election is right around the corner. It's a huge election year here in the United States. And after Labor Day, campaigning and advertising for campaigning and all sorts of political discussions online and social media all really, really heat up. And whenever there's something really big like this going on, that brings all the misinformation and disinformation creators out of the woodwork for whatever reason. There could be political reasons, there can be financial reasons, there's all sorts of reasons behind this. And I'm not going to try to attribute this to one party or the other, or even foreign or domestic. It happens for lots of reasons. It just happens to get worse now, but it happens in other situations all year long and for other reasons. When COVID hit, or whenever there's a worldwide emergency or any sort of big natural disaster, that's when a lot of these things creep up, because that's when people are most raw and when their emotions are most invested in these things. That's all over the news and things like that. So that's when these campaigns really ramp up, and elections is just yet another one where this happens. So I thought this would be a good time to revisit the notion of mis and disinformation, and more importantly, what you can do to spot it, and hopefully even try to prevent it from spreading, because it's really the virality of this stuff that makes it so dangerous. The classic quote, of course, being, "A lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can get its boots on." And that is a really old quote that no one is 100% sure who to attribute it to. Some people say Mark Twain, some people say Winston Churchill. There's actually, if you look at the blog article on this, you can actually dig deep into that if you're curious, but it doesn't matter. The real point of that is that expression came out a long time ago, well before the internet and social media. So it's a million times more true today. So just real quick, they need to come up with a much shorter term for this. Like, I think we should call it like misdis or something. But misinformation and disinformation are similar in that they're both false. But misinformation is more like people who just got it wrong. They heard it somewhere and forwarded it on without checking it, but it turns out it was really wrong. And, their hearts were in the right place. They didn't think it was wrong. They didn't think they were lying. They weren't trying to influence anybody in a negative way. They thought they were being helpful, but in reality, they were just spreading bad information. And then disinformation is malicious. It's actually somebody who knows what they're spreading is wrong, and they're doing it on purpose for some other intention. Again, political, financial, whatever. But the effect is basically the same. And again, I'm not going to really draw too much of a difference here, because at the end of the day, they're both spreading false information, just for different reasons. So a couple things. First of all, check yourself. Understand when you start getting upset. Most of this misdis stuff spreads because people get really angry or they get really scared. They tap into those really strong human emotions. So one of the things you need to do, and this is true of scams and other things as well, like we talked about the sextortion scams, or you get that call out of nowhere saying, "This is support. We've detected that your computer has a virus. We need to fix this right now." Or somebody is breaking into all your bank accounts right now. You need to act right away to stop this from happening. I'm here to help. Whatever. These are all scary, urgent things or things that make you really angry. And so they get you to engage, and they get you most often to spread them to your friends and family because you want them to be aware of this horrible thing that's going on too, right? So check yourself. When you start feeling really strong emotions like that, you need to kind of practice mindfulness. This is a type of mindfulness where you try to be aware of your emotions, especially strong emotions. And when that happens, you kind of need to trigger this thing of like, oh, wait, pause, hit the pause button, step back and kind of in a dissociated kind of way, look back at yourself from kind of like an out-of-body experience. Kind of look back and say, okay, what is going on here? Why am I getting worked up? What is causing me to have this emotional response? And just the fact that you're having that emotional response means you need to pay very close attention to what is causing it. And at that point, you should be checking your facts. So let's move on to the next thing, which is check the source. Where did this information come from? And I don't mean right now. I don't mean the post you're reading or the email that was forwarded to you. Where did the original information come from, especially whatever it is that's making you upset? Try to find the original source. And then once you've found that, you need to start asking yourself, can I trust this source? Is the author or is the website reputable? Or are they known for spreading wild stories? Also think about motivation. What is in it for them? Why did they write this article or make this post on social media? Why did they say what they say? Do they have an agenda they're trying to push? Are they trying to sell something or make money somehow? Or, even just keep you on their website longer to keep you watching more ads. That makes them more money. Think about the motives behind this stuff. Follow them. Not only follow the money, but follow the emotions. What does this person stand to gain, perhaps, by saying what they're saying and trying to get people riled up? Which brings me to another quote that I ran into while I was studying this for writing this article, and that is from Ben Franklin, who said, "Half the truth is often a great lie." So a lot of these kind of misinformation and disinformation things that go viral are often based on something that is true, has some kernel of truth to it, and then twists it in some way or takes it out of context. And that could be very powerful. The fact that someone can point to and say, "Oh, no, that really did happen," or "that is a real picture." Okay, great. But is that picture cropped? Like, is there part of that picture that's not shown? Is that picture actually an old picture of something else that someone is claiming to be something new? It doesn't have to be fake. It doesn't have to be AI generated. You could take a real image and still cause a lot of confusion and spread and disinformation if used properly. So check the source, figure out where it came from, try to find the original source of that information. And that's going to take a little digging. And by the way, at any point, what you could simply do here is say, you know what, that sounds fishy. I'm just going to delete this email. I'm going to skip this post. I'm not going to forward it. I'm not going to repost it. And I'm not going to let it get to me because, you know what, I don't even want to go through the effort of figuring this out. That is an option. But certainly, before you even think about reposting it yourself, with or without comments, or forwarding it on to somebody else, you absolutely should run through this exercise. Now, there are some websites that are out there today to help you find this quote-unquote fake news. I'm going to give you a few. If you go to my article, you can find some other resources that can help if for some reason you don't like these. One of my favorites is Snopes.com, Snopes.com. But there are some others that usually get a pretty good rating by multiple people on different partisan sides. Factcheck.org, PolitiFact.com, BBC Reality Check. These are some other ones you could try, and you could, of course, try more than one. But these are great sites to help you find things that are kind of going viral that may or not be true. And you can decide for yourself whether or not you agree with their analysis. The cool thing about these sites usually is they do a lot of research. They save you a lot of time and often provide you links to what they could find when they did the research on this, and they come to their conclusion, but you might actually come to a different conclusion. The nice thing is they've done a lot of the research for you, and you can do some more following up. Now, if the main part of this is an image, there's a couple other things you can do. First of all, if you want to find the original source of that image, you can use reverse image search tools like Google Image Search or TinEye, Tineye. These services are meant to take a picture and you give them the picture, and it'll try to find the original source of that image. But also, now that we're in the age of AI and very believable generated photos, AI still is not perfect. If you could try the image search, but if it was generated, you're probably not going to find it there. But if you want to know if it's AI generated, as an untrained user, you can still look for some kind of telltale signs. Look very closely at the image, blow it up if you need to. Look for oddities like lines that are warped that really should be straight, extra or missing fingers or limbs on people. That is something AI still for some reason can't get right. People have 6 fingers or 3 fingers. Or a third leg, if you look closely enough. Sometimes shadows, for altered images, shadows are there where they shouldn't be. If you really want to get technical, sometimes if there's an image like with reflections, make sure the reflection matches the actual part that it's reflecting. There are things you could kind of look at it if you know what you're doing to determine that an image has been altered or generated. Of course, I will say one thing, and this should be obvious, but it isn't for some people, obviously, because it happens a lot. Make sure that the thing that you were looking at isn't intended to be parody or comedy. The Onion, the website The Onion, which is absolutely fantastic, is so good at what they do that people have often mistaken their articles as being true when they're just trying to be funny and they're totally, totally made up. If you want to see some fun examples of that, there's a link in the article. So check yourself, check the source, check your facts. Certainly before you let it get you worked up, but definitely before you share it with anybody else. Do not spread this until you are absolutely sure it's true. And if you're not sure, make sure you put some caveats on it and say, look, this may or not be true, but this looks troubling. I still think you should know about it just in case. That's okay to put some conditions on it like that. But if you're really not sure, I would just recommend sit on it. Don't forward it until you can be sure that it's true. One more thing I will say is that if you're on like social media, for example, almost all modern social media sites have some way to report that you believe something is misinformation or disinformation. Now, what they will do with that, I can't promise, but there is a link in the show notes. I found a great article that had a link to every one. There's like 10, maybe 10 different social media sites, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all these others, where it links to something that tells you what to do if you believe you've come across information that maybe violates their terms of service or is otherwise just fake news. So let me wrap all this up by saying two more things. If it turns out that the person who shared this with you, forwarded you the email, reposted or whatever, is somebody that you know, I would like to encourage that you don't start a flame war over this. Like, don't publicly say, no, that's totally wrong and here's why. Even if you're right. I think we do that too much, and it just makes this whole situation worse. So I would be empathetic. I would give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they do believe it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were in a hurry and they saw this and they didn't check it and they just really quickly forwarded it and they didn't take the time to double check it. It happens. People are human. And I think a lot of our problem today is that we don't stop and listen to each other. Another old saying, seek first to understand and then be understood. So, maybe privately and tactfully reach out to these people and say, hey, this thing you forwarded or this thing you posted, I don't think that's right. Here's why I think that. You might want to check that out. Don't be accusatory. Don't say, don't assume that they're doing it for nefarious purposes. Act in good faith and assume that they were too. And, I'm not perfect. I've done this myself, but, our goal in life is not to be perfect. It's to be better. And then finally, this article would be a really good one, especially right about now, to share with other people. So this podcast episode, this blog article, this would be good to share with folks. And this, of course, works for my awareness campaign. But also, this is the kind of thing that I think a lot of people need to understand. This would be a great thing to share and a great time to do it. All right, there it is, your news and your tip of the week. All right, everybody, we're running a little bit long. I know I say that every week, and honestly, I am trying to not do that, and somehow I still end up doing it. I cut back on the articles, and then I just talk more about them. So anyway, I apologize. I'm working on it. I'll see if I'm trying to get this down to an hour, but I've been failing. Anyway, real quick, next week we're going to be talking with a representative from Tuda, previously called Tutanota, a secure email service, and we're going to be talking about quantum computing and its impact on encryption. Particularly, quantum computers theoretically could break a lot of our modern encryption. So what are we doing about that? And Tuda's doing something about that, and we'll talk about what can be done and what that means. But I've also got some other great interviews coming up. I've just recorded an interview with the two researchers behind the Tunnel Vision VPN vulnerability. We talk not just about that and how that works, but kind of pick apart VPNs and why they really aren't what we think they are, and they're definitely not a silver bullet for privacy and security. So that's a great episode. As I think I've already mentioned, I recorded Chris Thomas, aka Space Rogue, who is part of the famous hacker group The Loft. He was one of their founders and had some great kind of hacker history with him. That's coming up soon. I am scheduled to record an interview with Stacey Higginbotham, and we're going to talk about IoT security and privacy. That will be wonderful. She is a really great resource on that. I can't wait to talk to her. And then finally, the really big news, and I almost hate to jinx this, but I have been trying to interview Carissa Veliz for literally years. Ever since her book, Privacy's Power, came out, I have wanted to talk to her because it is such an amazing book. I've reached out again, and I've been pestering her for a while. Hopefully not too bad, but anyway, she finally has relented and agreed to do it. And after she read my online review, which you could find at my website, I think that maybe it changed her mind. So anyway, I will hopefully be talking with her soon, and I will be bringing you that great interview as well. Lots of great stuff coming up. Bruce Schneier for the 400th episode is coming up. Man, so much great stuff coming up for the end of this year. Subscribe if you haven't, and that way you will not miss any of that. Okay, take care, everybody. Stay safe out there, and until next week, as always, don't get caught with your drawbridge down.